My name is Kevin, and I've been a trucker for various companies for nearly 15 years now. Over the years, my routine has become second nature. Pick up goods, verify their accuracy, and deliver them without a hitch. Since we're not paid by the hour, efficiency is key, and as someone who has been in the game for so long, I like to think I can outwork all the younger guys eager to grab these jobs. But pushing myself to the limit often means operating on barely any sleep, and that can lead to dangerous situations. 4 years ago, I was working for a warehouse in North Dakota. For those unfamiliar, it's one of the flattest states, making trucking a bit easier. However, that flatness also meant that skipping a few hours of sleep could be the difference between keeping my job and getting fired. On a chilly Tuesday morning in May, the start of the week brought a heavier load, meaning more work for me. Determined to knock everything out in one go, I plotted my route into Montana, planning to drive straight through without stopping to sleep. I hit the road a few hours after lunch, expecting to reach my destination by early morning. The clock ticked past midnight, and I was fighting to keep my eyes open, pushing the semi as fast as I dared. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, willing myself to focus. And to keep myself alert, I remembered my buddy Thurston, another trucker who had introduced me to smelling salts. With just one sniff, they could wake you right up immediately. I took a big whiff, feeling the rush of adrenaline surge through me, hoping it would last until I reached my destination. But a half hour later, I was still struggling. My eyelids felt heavy, and just then, the truck drifted towards the shoulder, jolting me awake. Panic set in. I needed to pull over immediately, but the highway was deserted, with dense woods flanking either side. Slowing down, I scanned the area desperately for a place to stop, but when my headlights illuminated something odd ahead, a purple dress lay in the middle of the road. Confusion gripped me. Was I hallucinating from the exhaustion? Or what was happening exactly? I blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was real, and as I drove closer, dread began to settle in. About 200 yards further, I spotted a pair of shoes. My heart raced. What was going on? I continued to drive, praying for a safe place to pull over. My father, David, was a deeply religious man, so I clutched his old cross, hoping for protection. Just a little further, I saw more scattered clothing, some of it looking like it belonged to children. That's when the panic hit me like a wave. Something was seriously wrong. I stopped the truck and sat there, my instincts screaming at me to stay put. After a moment, curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped out to inspect the pile of clothing. The cold morning air was biting, awakening my senses and heightening my awarenesses. As I approached, I realized it was indeed kids' clothing, both boy and girl items mixed together, glancing around into the shadowy woods. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I had to keep my wits about me. This could easily be a trap, Suddenly I heard a crunching noise from my left, and I whipped around as my heart was pounding in my chest. I stood there frozen, waiting for another sound. After what felt like an eternity, a second crunch echoed from the opposite side of the road. Fear surged through me, and I sprinted back towards the truck, adrenaline propelling me forward. Just as I leaped into the cab, a child's scream shattered the silence, freezing me in place. My heart raced as I stood at the crossroad. I didn't want to confront whoever was lurking in the dark woods, but I couldn't just abandon a child in distress either. Before I could decide, another scream rang out, almost identical to the first one. My instincts kicked in even more, and without a second thought, I fired up the truck and pointed the headlights towards the woods where the sound had come from. As the beams of light cut through the darkness, I spotted 3 or 4 figures hiding behind some trees. One of them was holding a massive speaker. My stomach dropped as I realized they were trying to lure me into the woods with a fake child scream. I sat there, stunned, processing the bizarre scene unfolding before me. I reached for my phone to call the police, but before I could even start dialing, I heard a loud thump on the body of the truck, a distraction from the other direction. Fear coursed through me. I had to get out of there. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, tearing away. From that nightmarish scene, I caught a glimpse of a figure on the other side of the road who shouted something I couldn't make out before throwing something that cracked my passenger side window. The sound echoed in my ears as I sped off into the night. the adrenaline pumping through my veins. The final hour of driving was eerily silent, my mind racing with what had just happened. There was no way in hell I was stopping to sleep anywhere near those woods. When I finally completed my delivery, I collapsed into a deep sleep, 10 hours straight. And when I woke, the first thing I did was call in the police, who promised to investigate the woods and keep me updated. In the quiet aftermath, I replayed the night in my mind, cursing myself for stepping out of the truck. I should have minded my own business, but the thought of children in the danger was too compelling to ignore. To this day, I still have no idea what those people were planning. Why didn't they rush me when they had the chance? Or what would have happened if I had run into those woods after hearing the screams? After all of these years on the road, nothing has ever come close to being as strange or downright terrifying as that experience. It was a rainy night as I drove home from my shift at the late-night diner. The night had been quiet, yet I felt an unusual burst of energy, knowing I'd need to take melatonin when I got home to finally unwind. My route was a scenic road, picturesque by day but shrouded in darkness by night, with only the occasional parking lot for nearby restaurants or shops breaking up the stretches of dense, looming forest. As I passed a familiar deli, I noticed a woman standing under a flickering light post, waving her hand frantically. I slowed down, my heart racing with a mix of concern and hesitation. She looked to be in her mid-50s, tall and thin, soaked to the bone from the rain. "Do you need a ride?" I called out. She heard over as her voice was dripping with gratitude as she praised me for my kindness. I asked her where she was headed, and she said just up the road to town. Against my better judgment, I opened the door to let her in. As she settled into the passenger seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. While she seemed sweet, I couldn't ignore the unsettling gaps in her smile. She was missing several teeth. My mind raced with questions. Was she homeless? She didn't smell like it, but the rain could have masked any door. Her hair was soaked and clung to her face, which made her look even more disheveled. Still, she smiled the entire time, appearing harmless enough. We pulled up to a gas station and I figured I might as well fill up. "Do you want anything from inside?" I asked. She said, "No thanks, honey." I then went in to pay for gas and grab a few drinks. But when I returned to the parking lot, my heart dropped. The woman was gone. I scanned the area frantically, but she vanished into thin air, feeling a mix of concern and relief. I filled up my tank and continued my drive home. Once inside my apartment, which occupied the first level of a two-family house, I kicked off my wet shoes and set the drinks on the counter. I wasn't quite tired yet, so I took melatonin and I tried to settle in for the night. However, sleep eluded me, as my mind was racing with thoughts about the woman I had just picked up. Strange noises from outside my bedroom made me dismiss the sounds as my upstairs neighbor, but deep down, I wish I had been more suspicious before drifting off. I jolted awake in a dark room, a rarity after taking melatonin. Drowsy and incredibly thirsty, I reached for my water on the bedside table when I noticed a shadowy figure crouched in the corner of my bedroom, hidden behind my dresser. My heart dropped into my stomach. This had to be some hallucination. I shook my head violently, even slapping myself, but the figure stood up and walked out of the room. I was frozen in shock, unable to scream or move as panic coursed through my veins. The silence that followed was deafening. Not a sound from outside, no footsteps, not even the creak of a door. Desperately, I grabbed my phone and called my dad, breathless and panicked. I said, "Dad, I saw someone. There was someone in my room." He answered, confused, suggesting I might have just had a night terror. I stayed on the line with him as I gathered the courage to leave my bedroom, turning on the living room lights. I scanned a small place, but I was alone. I began to think. Maybe I had imagined it all, but locked my bedroom door and forced myself back to bed, the shadows seeming to close in around me. Morning light eventually broke through the darkness and I stumbled out of bed, still shaken from the night before. I made my way to the foyer, only to find the door was already unlocked. My heart sank. Was last night real? I searched the apartment to confirm I was alone and stepped outside to my car to grab my gym bag. That's when I noticed them, damp yellow-brown stains covering the back seat, and my blanket was gone. Overwhelmed with unease, I skipped the gym and stayed locked inside my apartment, feeling genuinely disturbed. I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. The unsettling events of that night haunted me, driving me to find a new place to live within the month. That's what I did, as the fear of what could have happened was too much to bear. A lingering reminder of how a simple act of kindness can sometimes lead you into the unknown. A few months ago, I found myself in a situation I never should have agreed to, tagging along with my friend Michael to a house party during our first year of high school. I wasn't even invited, but Michael had a way of charming his way in, and I reluctantly accepted the invitation, knowing I wouldn't be able to drive home. When we arrived at the party late that night, Michael insisted I leave my phone in his car. You could lose it, he warned, or someone might try to grab it. I was confused but nodded, feeling a twinge of unease as we stepped into the vibrant chaos of the backyard party. Laughter and music filled the air, mingled with the smell of smoke and alcohol as groups of teens huddled together, some indulging in who knows, whatever you call it. After a couple of hours of mingling, I realized I'd had way too much to drink. My vision was a hazy blur, and I leaned against the wall for support. I checked my watch, and I saw it was either midnight or close to 1 a.m. It was definitely time to find Michael, but as I stumbled through the crowd, I couldn't spot him anywhere. I then asked a few partygoers if they had seen him, but no one could help. Frustrated, I reached into my pocket to call him, only to realize that my phone was back in the car with Michael. Panic surged through me as I faced the reality of my situation, with no way to contact anyone and the party swirling around me. I decided that my only option was to walk home alone. I remembered my house wasn't far, but the chilly fall air sent shivers down my spine as I stepped out into the darkness. I began walking, but each step felt heavier than the last. The drinks had left me dizzy and lightheaded a little bit, and I found myself lost in a whirlwind of thoughts. Why had Michael abandoned me? Why did I listen to his ridiculous idea about leaving my phone? Regret washed over me as I scolded myself for drinking too much. As I walked, fatigue set in, and I crossed my arms tightly over my chest to ward off the cold. I was absolutely desperate to get back home. I remembered hitchhiking, holding out my thumb. I watched as car after car drove past, ignoring my silent plea for help. Just as I began to lose hope, a gray truck pulled up and stopped in front of me. Relief flooded through me as I stumbled towards the vehicle. The window rolled down, revealing an older man with a scruffy beard. He asked if I needed a ride, and without thinking twice, I climbed into the truck, feeling grateful for the unexpected kindness. As we drove, he attempted to make small talk, but I was too disoriented to respond properly, only managing murmurs in reply. However, as we turned the corner onto my street, a sense of dread washed over me. Something felt off about this man. My instincts screamed that I should get out, but I couldn't bring myself to speak up. Suddenly, we drove past my house, and my heart raced with fear. I opened my mouth to tell him to stop, but before I could utter a word, he turned to me with a sinister grin. "You know," he said, smirking, "you shouldn't be drunk while hitchhiking. You'd make a very easy target." My blood ran cold as he reached over and began rubbing my leg. I was frozen in terror, paralyzed by his menacing aura, when out of nowhere, the blaring sirens of a police car pierced the night. The truck was flooded with flashing red and blue lights, and in that instant, hope surged through me. The man panicked and slammed on the brakes, fumbling to unlock the doors. I seized the moment and jumped out of the truck, running as fast as I could towards the approaching officer, breathless and shaking. I recounted everything that had just happened. The officer listened intently, but unfortunately he explained that he was looking for a gray truck involved in a theft from a store nearby. I didn't know if it was the same man or not, but I felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude for the intervention. The officer gave me a ride home, and as I sat in the passenger seat, I reflected on the terrifying encounter. I realized then how crucial it was to be responsible and aware of my surroundings, even when trying to have a good time. That night changed everything for good. I vowed never to let myself get that out of control again.